have something in mind. Welcome to today's American Community Media Weekly National Briefing. I'm Pilar Marrero, your moderator for today and co-producer of our weekly Friday briefings with my colleague, Sunita Surachi. Today, we will discuss how the Trump administration has targeted California and particularly Los Angeles for an immigration crackdown, and how the state, both from the legal point of view and through its citizens' actions, is becoming a leader in the resistance to these indiscriminate raids. Since his first term, President Donald Trump has often clashed with California, a stronghold of progressive policies on immigration, healthcare, the environment, and social issues that oppose his administration's agenda. California's large immigrant population and protective laws have made it a frequent target. The state has been reliably Democratic since the 1990s, following the decline of Republican influence after Pete Wilson's 1994 Proposition 187, which aimed to restrict immigrant access to education and healthcare. Immigration recently sparked a major standoff between Los Angeles and the administration. Immigration raids escalated tensions, leading to protests and the deployment of the National Guard and the Marines, culminating in the largest single-day protest in U.S. history. Our expert panel will examine California's response and discuss strategies for effective resistance. Our distinguished speakers are Antonio Villaraigosa, former LA mayor and gubernatorial hopeful; Jeannette Zanipatin, Director of Policy and Advocacy at the Coalition for Humane Immigrant Rights, CHIRLA; and Dr. Henry Brady, Professor of Political Science and Public Policy at the University of California, Berkeley, and former Dean of the Goldman School. We ask reporters to enter questions in the chat, and we will then proceed to Q&A immediately after each speaker presents. Later this afternoon, we will send the video along with expanded bios. For the first 40 minutes of this briefing, we will have the panel discussion, and then we will break. And in the last 20 minutes, we will welcome the California Attorney General of California, Rob Bonta, who will tell us about what legal actions the state has undertaken and who will also be available to answer your questions. Please place your questions in the chat. Your participation makes the briefing better for everyone. So I'm going to start with Jeannette Zanipatin. She's an immigration lawyer who worked at MALDEF, the Mexican-American Legal Defense and Education Fund, and now it's with CHIRLA, one of the country's most active and influential pro-immigrant organizations based in LA. Jeannette, when we talked this week, you said that some of the stuff going on with the immigration system and with the raids were completely unconstitutional and unprecedented. Can you expand on the most underreported aspect of this for a few minutes before we go to other questions? Hello? Jeannette?
Yes, sorry about that.
Okay.
So just by way of background, I am an immigration attorney, almost 30 years of practice in immigration law. And just by way of background, like we have never seen anything like this, like the moment that we're seeing this moment at this present moment. So some of the things that we are seeing are obviously the Trump administration asking judges to dismiss cases for those folks that have active cases in immigration court. In many instances, judges are complying with the Trump administration and dismissing these cases. And once folks leave their court hearings, they're being arrested right outside of right side of the courthouse, right? And in many instances, some folks are represented by counsel, some aren't. But when they do have counsel, counsel is not able to ascertain what is the point of arrest, where their clients are being transported to, and are cut off from communication with their clients. And so we have seen and have experienced ourselves the inability to be able to speak to our clients once we do locate them. For example, we were able to go to B18, the central detention center here in Los Angeles, unable to have access to anybody who was detained immediately after the raids. We went to Adelanto 3 days after the raids started. I went with Judy Chu and other members of Congress trying to gain entry. Congressional members have oversight of detention centers, yet were denied entry. I also, as an attorney, was also denied entry 3 days immediately following the raid. So this has been an ongoing issue in terms of what we're seeing in terms of the unconstitutional and illegal ways that this administration is operating. They're also having folks that are being arrested at their immigration court check-ins, at USCIS interviews, again, unprecedented for routine check-ins, for routine interviews with USCIS. People now have to decide, do I go to my appointment and risk getting my case thrown out or getting my application denied, or in the case of court, right, in case of going to court, do I get a deportation order entered against me because I don't go to court, but then I also risk getting picked up and arrested by ICE enforcement. And so all of these things together just really demonstrate sort of the um, uh, lack of this administration just really trying to do and change policy sort of at whim without really taking into account our constitutional protections and rights that we have as folks here in the United States, as well as denying access to clients for attorneys who, in many instances, need to get a hold of their clients before their clients get deported to third countries, right? And so it is of utmost importance that we shed a light from the media's perspective in all the ways that this administration is working unconstitutionally and I would say illegally at this moment.
Thank you, Jeannette. Not to mention that they're grabbing people off the street.
Exactly.
And we've seen many videos about that and the ways, some of it really brutal, that they're handling people such as gardeners and paleteros and people who are really not criminals at all. But I wanted to talk about the issue of who these men are, because there's a lot of concern in the community about who these ICE agents are. They don't have any identification on them. They don't have badges. Their faces are covered. And in some cases, they have been seen changing the license plates of their cars. Can you tell us something about this?
So one of the things that CHIRLA does is we run the Los Angeles County Rapid Response Network. So we get calls about ICE sightings and we have volunteers that go to the sites to try to confirm ICE enforcement activities and just talk to individuals and sort of get, evidence, right, in terms of what's happening or testimonials about what is happening. And so we have seen reports and have videos of ICE agents, for example, switching out license plates. We are seeing a lot of license plates from out of state, from places like Louisiana and Texas. So in some instances, it may be that they're deputizing law enforcement entities from other states to come in and help them do some of the enforcement. But in other instances, we just don't know who these individuals are. They may be private citizens that are engaging. It may be bounty hunters. It may be a whole host of individuals, again, that we just do not know. When someone is approached by an agent and you ask them to identify themselves, they are supposed to identify themselves. Yet at this moment, we are seeing exactly what you just described, masked men and women approaching folks in very aggressive, very violent ways. When asked to identify themselves, they're just not identifying themselves. And so we are looking into what protections we may have as a state in order to require identification and to not allow, for example, individuals to conduct these operations wearing masks. And so right now at the state level, there are two bills that are being introduced to prohibit exactly these types of activities. But we're also talking and speaking with other local law enforcement entities to see also what other types of protections or jurisdiction does local law enforcement have in the wake of all these folks that are being aggressively and violently attacked and in many instances kidnapped.
Sunita, ask your question because there's been a report recently on the arrest numbers, and I think the majority of them do not have any criminal record. Sunita, ask your question, please.
Yeah. Jeannette and Dr. Brady, ICE ostensibly has to have a warrant in order to detain people, but is there any data on how many people are being arrested without those warrants?
I don't have data right now if Dr. Brady does, but we do know in many instances they're not providing any warrants. They're just arresting and detaining folks merely based on the way they look. So it's purely racial profiling. What we're seeing, targeting folks that Black and brown and other people of color as well. This is really impacting also the API community. I would be remiss if I wouldn't say that it is impacting all of our immigrant communities in many significant ways. I will say my latest understanding is that of those folks arrested, around 93% of folks that have been detained do not have a serious or violent offense. And at least it's within the 63 to 65% of folks have no criminal convictions. And so the rhetoric that we hear from this administration that they're going after criminals and really bad people is really in question because of the data that we're seeing of folks being detained and arrested.
Yes, and that information is taken from the Cato Institute report. There are other analyses that have been given out there, but this is one of them. Let's see. We still have a few minutes with Jeannette. Henrietta, can you ask your question, please?
Yes, thanks, Pilar. Given the limitations that were announced today that the Supreme Court has placed on judges, what do local lawyers have to challenge the arrests that ICE is making, especially when it comes to the powers of local judges now that have been limited?
Yeah, so we're still analyzing the injunction piece and how that might play out given the Supreme Court decision on birthright citizenship. But we do believe, right, that at the local level, we still have the ability to file lawsuits and ask for injunctions. Whether they're going to be nationwide, that's what this decision sort of calls into question. But we could still go into district court and file for injunctive relief at the local or even at the state level. Because even with the birthright citizenship case, I believe that some of those injunctions that were in place prior to the Supreme Court decision, those injunctions are in place for several states. And so we do know that several states do have protection from birthright citizenship.
Yeah, 22 states, including
22 states,
California.
exactly.
Yes.
Yeah, including California. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you, Jeannette. Hold on, and you can chime in other moments in the briefing if you like. But we're going to move on to our next panelist. Thank you so much. So we are now joined by Antonio Villaraigosa. He was the first Latino mayor of Los Angeles, and he's now running for governor of California. Mayor, how do you feel, and what do you think about what's going on in LA at this time?
Well, thank you for having me, Pilar, and thank you to CHIRLA and MALDEP and others who have been on the front lines of fighting against the Trump policies with respect to immigration. As you know, Pilar, because we've known each other almost 30 years, I first got involved in immigrant rights work in 1972. I was involved in the fight against the Rodino bill, the Mazzoli bill, the Simpson-Mazzoli bill, the fight for, immigration reform in '86. I have never seen in my lifetime these kind of actions on the part of the federal government, federalizing the National Guard for the first time in 60 years. And the last time the National Guard was federalized, they were federalized for the purpose of protecting people's civil rights, not infringing on those civil rights. I can tell you that I've never in my lifetime seen people in military fatigues or civilian wear covered from head to shoulder with assault weapons, flash bang grenades, going after nannies in LA, gardeners, people working at places, schools, graduations. I've never in my lifetime seen anything like this. We know that in the 30s during the repatriation movement, so-called repatriation movement. They actually deported American citizens. They're trying to do that again. We know that in the 1950s with Operation Wetback, again, more than 1 million people deported. But in modern times, nothing like this. And certainly, even in those times, you didn't see people who refused to identify themselves looking, as someone just mentioned, sometimes people believing they're getting kidnapped, kind of like you see in Russia or totalitarian governments. We've never seen that in this country. And so I think for all of us, it's what many of us thought could happen. Some doubted that it would. This is a move on the part of the federal government to go after not criminals. You just heard more than 90% of these people have not committed crimes, and probably a much smaller percentage have not committed serious or violent crimes. This is just unacceptable. It's un-American. It has to be a flashpoint for those of us who believe in our democracy and who want to fight a president who clearly doesn't.
Okay, there's a question in the chat. Maybe you have something to say. Linda Joy Fenley from Chico Sol, do you want to ask your question?
Audio.
Yes.
Yeah, it seems like they are able to track down people. Besides the ones who are grabbing off the street, they target certain people and they find out where they are through the DMV or maybe other agencies. But can California do something to stop that, since it is a California Department of Motor Vehicles? Can we require them to have subpoenas or court orders? What can the state of California do to limit their access to information?
If you're asking me,
Yes.
I'm not a lawyer, and we have lawyers on the call, but I could tell you, yes, we could require that they ask for a subpoena, or we should at least make that effort. We should do everything legally possible. I think this is an opportunity for Americans to come together, no matter if you're Latino, related to somebody who's undocumented, or just believe that our civil liberties have been infringed upon at a level that, again, in my lifetime, I've never seen. So I think we should use the courts where we can. Clearly, this is a conservative a court that doesn't believe in stare decisis, doesn't believe in civil liberties to the extent that prior courts have. I think we should use every means possible to push back, including demonstrations. They have to be peaceful. I'll be clear about something. I grew up, and probably the only person on this thing for more than 50 years fighting this kind of thing. And I can tell you this, they got to be peaceful. When they're not, we lose too many people. And so I believe that we can use the courts and should, but obviously it's going to be an uphill fight in this climate.
I hope the state does something. I hope that I don't know who's up to the legislature or whatever, but something.
Yeah, we will have California Attorney General Rob Bonta later in the hour, so we can ask that question of him. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Sunita, do you want to ask your question?
Sure. Mr. Villaraigosa, I was at the downtown LA No Kings protest on June 14th. At about 4 o'clock, the LAPD issued dispersal orders and then subsequently used what they call less lethal green guns to fire rubber bullets into the large and largely peaceful crowd. Could you comment on that? Was this the correct means to handle a crowd of this size?
Well, look, I wasn't there. I've only had secondary confirmation of some of those things. Obviously, they should have an after action report. I know the mayor is very concerned about some of those allegations. They should review what happened. If there were civil rights violations on the part of police officers, they should be, prosecuted or reprimanded. I don't have precipient knowledge of what happened. I think the real story, though, and the real focus has to be on the federalizing the National Guard and the bringing in the 700 Marines. Donald Trump, that's got to be the focus. But clearly, the city should look at what happened and reprimand, discipline folks to the extent that those actions are accurate.
And Henrietta put a question in the chat that I was going to ask of you, Mr. Mayor. You are running for governor. If you become governor of California, what's your plan? Because you are going to be facing the ire of Donald Trump as much as Governor Newsom is right now. Are you in agreement with what he's done? And what's your plan to represent California in front of this administration?
Well, when they sued regarding the federalizing the National Guard, I actually called for that on TV on Sunday, and I think on Monday they decided to do that. I'm not saying he did it because I said he should do it. I think we need to use the courts. We have lawyers on this, call. I think we need to use the courts, but we need to be clear. You can't actually physically stop them. That's clear. The notion that the federal government can't engage in deportations or that we can physically stop them, it's just not. It's just not true. We can't. But I think we do need to challenge, review every possible way to push back. And so I do support most of what he's done. I think we need to engage, the public to push back on this. But, it's not like, we can push back against federalizing. We tried, and we should appeal it, and we should take it all the way to the Supreme Court. Again, the last time we did that was to protect civil rights, not to infringe upon them. But it's not like we can physically stop them. I think you could use the bully pulpit, and I will. I have my whole life. In fact, in a way that very few people in politics, at least in California that I know of, that has been doing this since I was a kid. But I also know the limits. We led marches. We developed, a broad movement around that in '86. And I think we needed to, and the same with 187. Remember, I was elected the year 187 was passed. Yeah. And I challenged it throughout the 6 years I was in the legislature. We can challenge it, we can speak against it, but you can't physically stop them from doing what they're doing. That's why the courts are important. That's why having, people like the people we have on this call who spent a good part of their lifetime, in the case of the last speaker, fighting for immigrant rights, and more importantly, fighting for the American Constitution. I mean, today we just heard that the courts have opined that a district court cannot enjoin the federal government on this issue of birthright citizenship. I mean, that hasn't happened in more than 100 years. Again, some of this that's going on is is it's a cases of first impression. And should we challenge it? Absolutely. But if you say, what's the plan? Anybody that tells you there's a plan to physically stop that, there's none, except for movement. I do believe in the power of people. I do believe that we can develop a movement around this. But those of us who have been involved most of our life on this issue know this. Martin Luther King and Gandhi showed the way. It's got to be peaceful. It's got to be broad. It can't just be us. And while a lot of communities, and I do agree with the last speaker that a lot of communities are terrified, let's be clear about this. They come after us more than they come after anyone else. They disproportionately focus on us. And what I've said is, I would be against these kind of raids if they were Black, if they were, Asian, African, whatever. And I think I'm hoping that most people will feel the same way. But some of us feel it differently than others. And I think that's what I bring. When I saw those images of people being, dragged away at graduations, dragged away from courthouses when they're with their lawyers, dragged away in the streets. I feel it in the way not everybody does. Let's be clear. Those are our people. And, they're hardworking. They work every day. They contribute mightily to this country. And it's an absolute abomination that more people aren't as indignant as many of us on this call.
Thank you. Thank you. Point well taken. There's no magic wand. There needs to be people power. Thank you so much, Major Villaraigosa. Stay around if you can, a few more minutes. We're going to go to Professor Henry Brady. Professor Brady, is the administration especially targeting California, and why is that?
Well, I want to say two things. First, I want to say that what the politics are, and then say what the impacts are. The politics are that we represent everything that the Trump administration is not happy with. So we are the exemplar of, frankly, success, having the perspective that we have, which is one that emphasizes diversity, that welcomes immigrants, that provides actually state support for immigrants and for undocumented immigrants as well. So we do just a lot of things that are antithetical to what the Trump administration wants to do and thinks is the right model for America. I would say we're the anti-MAGA model, and because of our success, and there's just no question, but despite the rhetoric from the Trump administration, this is an incredibly successful state, that we are the exemplar that causes them pain and they want to hurt us. And so let me talk about, just briefly, the 5 things they're doing right now, at least, which are hurting us and which will have long-term consequences. One is tariffs in the ports of LA and Long Beach and Oakland, for that matter, which are enormously important to the United States. 31% of container goods come through the San Pedro ports. So that's number one, and that's causing loss of jobs. Number two, we've talked a lot about the immigrants and what that's going to do to the economy. It's going to cause people not to have people to do construction, to do healthcare, to do agriculture, and that's going to hurt California's economy. Third, on budgetary level, they're going to hurt us, and already with the big, beautiful bill, so-called, they're hurting us with respect to Medicaid, especially, but also food stamps. There's direct effects. That bill would probably reduce the number of people with health coverage in California by millions. But then there's indirect effects as well, because there were monies that wouldn't come to California and that would cause us to have budgetary problems. I'm very worried that the state can't cover the shortfalls that are going to occur because of those cuts. So that's that. And then there's what they did in Los Angeles with bringing troops in. The mayor is absolutely right. This is unprecedented. It's worth knowing, by the way, that in '65, Lyndon Johnson actually first talked to the governor of the state of Alabama, George Wallace, before he sent the troops. and then sent them when Wallace was unwilling to protect civil rights protesters. Trump didn't even call the governor of our state to ask him what should be done or how it should be done. So this is really unprecedented norm breaking. And then finally, I'd say what he's doing to the universities. This is going to have really enormous long-term consequences. The short-term consequences are that we may have more trouble enrolling undocumented students and be given grief for that. But the long-term impacts will be that will perhaps ruin the greatest higher education system literally in the world. And that's the UCs, the CSUs, and the community colleges. And to ruin those institutions is just an act of vandalism that's unprecedented and extraordinary. And that is maybe going to have very, very long-term consequences in terms of our ability to be technical innovators. Now, here's if there's any good news, the good news. All of these are going to start hurting our economy and the economy of the United States as a result, since we're such a large fraction of the economy of the United States. And as a result, there are going to be economic consequences. And we'll see if that starts to cut in terms of the rest of the country, recognizing that vandalism is not a good idea.
You know, just on that, I think it was the Bay Area Council Institute just put out a report that the cost of all of this to the California economy could be $275 billion, I think is the number.
Yep.
Astronomical cost, not to mention ag, construction, housing costs, service economy, hospitality. What these people don't understand is the vast majority of these people are working hard in jobs that nobody on this call would do for what they pay you. And it's going to have a deleterious effect on top of, tariffs, which are taxes, so that you're clear. The cost to the economy is great. I will say one last thing. I've been talking about winning the middle lately as I go up and down the state. I was in Bakersfield with a very, very conservative crowd. And I said the middle is standing up for the nannies and the gardeners who are being pulled. And it was interesting. I said, if you want to put people at the border, you put people at the border. If you want to go after violent criminals, go after violent criminals. But going after these hardworking people is absolutely unacceptable. And everybody started to clap. These were very conservative people. I think there is an opportunity for us to win the day on this issue if we're smart. And if we fight back in a way that is looking to win, not to score points, not to be the most progressive, but to really challenge what these people are doing as un-American, as beyond the pale, as something that Americans cannot tolerate. What we see here, and some people spoke to this, while he was running, is a despot who doesn't believe in our Constitution, who believes America's for people that come from certain countries, not other ones. And I think that kind of thinking goes the grain of what the vast majority of people believe in.
Thank you, Antonio. Professor Brady, what will happen, you think, if Trump has said, he has floated the idea that he's going to stop sending money to California. Obviously, according to our governor, we send more money to the feds that they send to us. But what can happen in this fight? What's the impact of that?
Well, obviously, one of the impacts is going to be the people of California will start seeing bad things happening. And I would think the rest of the nation will too as well. Without agricultural workers, we can't harvest the crops in the Central Valley that are sent back east to provide the fruits and vegetables for many Americans. So that's just one example. And by the way, the figure that the mayor mentioned is the one from the Bay Area Economic Institute report, about $275 billion. But in fact, if that's just for the impacts of immigration policy, it doesn't count the impacts of the budgetary policy and the new big beautiful bill, or the trade policy, or the impact on universities, or frankly, just even the climate of the state that occurs when you're stationing troops in one of its major cities with no apparent reason. And so I would say the impacts could be quite a bit larger than that. And in a $4 trillion economy, when you get to something like $500 billion, when you get to $275 billion, you're talking real money. When you get to maybe $500 billion, pretty soon you're talking really an enormous impact. And so right now, they're in the early period of what they're doing. And frankly, the consequences have not hit yet. So even the impacts of the tariff policy haven't hit yet. President Trump was bragging today that inflation's actually come down. That's really because of Biden policies. And we're going to start seeing inflation go up for sure with tariffs once they start really hitting. And in that point, I think the American people are going to start asking, is this what we bargained for? I think, by the way, too, that one of the things that folks should do is emphasize the notion that they didn't really bargain for the notion that the Trump administration was going to deport every immigrant they could get their hand on. That, in fact, they were talking about people who were violent or mentally ill or problematic in that regard. And that seems to me a very important talking point that needs to be emphasized again and again and again.
Thank you. Thank you. Sunita, yeah, it's a very good point. Ask your question, please.
Thank you. Dr. Brady, the UCs and to some extent the CSUs currently manage to attract many of the brightest minds from around the world. With the current investigation of these systems and a foreseeable drop in enrollment, in foreign student enrollment, what does that mean for the innovation and entrepreneurship our state is renowned for? A broad question, but I thought I'd ask it nonetheless.
Well, I think it's a real issue. I mean, we have lived off of the fact that we have immigrants who come to California and who do extraordinary things, and to stop that flow is going to hurt California. We've also lived off a university system that's the most innovative in the world. Berkeley, for example, is #1 in the number of venture capital supported startups, above Stanford, by the way. So it just turns out, and Stanford's pretty good too, although it's hard for a Cal professor to say that. And so the net result is we have extraordinary universities that have really led the way and made this economy strong. To hurt those universities and to hurt our innovation future, as I say, it's an act of vandalism. I just don't see it as any other way, on a pretense that really is a very weak one, which is that there's anti-Semitism. And yes, there are problems. Yes, there are things we need to fix, but we can fix them ourselves, thank you. And I think the intervention of the federal government is a tremendous mistake. I don't know if anybody read the message that was sent to Harvard about what the federal government wanted to do there. No business, no organization would accede to having your admissions policy, your curricular policy, and your hiring policies all run by the federal government. And the thought that the government could run the universities better than we can, or that, as Kristi Noem, the Secretary of Homeland Security, said, that she's saving us from socialism, is really hard to take. And in fact, it's ironic when they're trying to intervene in institutions in just the way that a government that was socialist might in fact do, including, by the way, taking a piece of the US Steel deal, which to my mind is the example of what socialism looks like when you start taking over private corporations by the government. So, and by the way, LA is one of the most capitalist and innovative cities in the world.
Yes. It
ain't socialist.
Yeah, that's correct. Jeannette, I want to bring you back into the conversation. You at CHIRLA are often in the front lines and in the center of what's happening. Are you getting reports from the community regarding the impact this is having in the larger immigrant community in LA?
Yeah, so we're being impacted in so many ways by our community. We get phone calls from our members of friends and families that have disappeared. It is taking us several days to locate folks, as I mentioned earlier. A lot of the online systems to try to track folks either through the detention system or in the court system, they're not being updated at this moment. So it does take us several days to even find where someone may be located. Folks are really afraid to take their children to school, to go to medical appointments, to go to places of worship. Folks are too afraid to go and get groceries for themselves and their families, to go to work. And so what we're seeing is just a lot of individuals just really afraid to go anywhere in Los Angeles. There are certain neighborhoods where you barely see anybody walking the streets of LA. And so a lot of mutual aid is happening. A lot of organizations, different policymakers, different CBOs and NGOs are coming together to provide that mutual aid, to take food to families who need food, to take much needed supplies as well. And so it's an all hands on deck situation right here in LA. I know for our office, we are working with key policymakers, like I said, to try to locate folks. We are seeing the arrest of U.S. citizens as well. We have seen 3 arrests within the last week or so of U.S. citizens that are being detained, picked up by ICE enforcement agents, then placed into federal detention. And even in those instances, it takes us several days to locate individuals. And so what we are seeing is completely unprecedented. And we need the media to continue to tell these stories that are coming out of LA and really just change the narrative of what the Trump administration is trying to portray as LA being violent, as protesters being violent. The real violence is being waged against our communities. They are being waged by the FBI, by DEA, by ATF, DHS, CBP, HSI, and all of this is being fortified by the Marines and by the National Guard. And so make no mistake, this is a militarized enforcement action that is being waged against all of LA, all civilians in LA County. And it is true, many even folks that have status are afraid to go out. People who are folks who are U.S. citizens are carrying their birth certificates, are carrying their passports. I have an 18-year-old that I already told, you need to say X, Y, and Z if you ever get stopped. You have to have your passport because people who look like us are getting picked up, no questions asked.
Thank you, Jeannette. I want to go back to the mayor, and we are a little late. We're still waiting. Okay, he's coming on now. We're still waiting for the Attorney General, but let's close this panel by just asking Mr. Villaraigosa, you are familiar with the budgetary issues of California. You were the Speaker of the Assembly back in the day. What's the worst that can happen if Trump is intent on hitting California budgetarily?
I think Harry said it. When I said 275 billion, I was talking about just the immigration raids and the impact on industry, to the extent that he's taking away Medicaid, and particularly from the states who have expanded Medi-Cal and Obamacare. When you look at all of the proposals that he's making with respect to the budget, I don't think there's been an estimation by the LAO, but I'll tell you, it's going to be in the billions. It's going to have a tremendous impact, and we're going to, whoever is the next governor is going to have to make some really tough choices, and that's why I said we have to challenge this wherever we can, through the courts. Through a mass movement of people against these policies, but we're also there's going to be on the short term until we win back the House. There's going to be a lot of economic and pain in the state.
Yeah, and Professor Brady, Dean Brady, what's your take on how strong the national Democrats have been on this? There's a sense in many communities that they would want the party to be better, stronger, more organized. What's happening there?
Well, as you probably know, there's a lot of internecine fighting that's been problematic for the Democratic National Committee, and that's certainly been a problem. It's not clear that they've figured out a route yet to move forward. I mean, this is fairly standard for a party that just lost an election, and so it's not surprising. There is a need for some people to stand up. I mean, to be honest, I've been happy to see the governor of California, Gavin Newsom, stand up and say things. And I think that's what California really has to do. And I think it also has to be with the edge of we're not a failure, we're a success. Uh, I'd rather be in California than Florida. And I can tell you why I think Florida's long-term prospects, climate change, and economically, it's so dependent upon constant growth of more people coming into that state.
Yeah.
Compared to us with this extraordinary technical capability, I'd rather be in California than Florida. We're a better model for America. And furthermore, we're a generous model. We believe in the America that has a Statue of Liberty that welcomes immigrants and tries to find ways to support immigrants. Why? Partly because it turns out those immigrants make us better.
Thank you, Professor, and thank you to all of you for being in this panel. We have now closed this panel. We're going to move on because we are joined now by the California Attorney General, Rob Bonta. If you want to stay, you guys are welcome to stay. If you need to go, you are welcome to go as well. Thank you so much. Let's see, Mr. Attorney General. Okay. Mr. Bonta, can you hear me?
Hi, I'm here. How are you?
We are very good. Thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it. Well, I was going to ask you a question, but today's decision in the Supreme Court is just pushing me to ask a different one. Can you tell us what the impact of this decision is for California and for the 22 states that has sued against this executive order eliminating birthright citizenship?
Absolutely, and maybe if it's okay, I'd like just to make some brief opening remarks, and say thank you for all that you do. I really do believe that at my core that we're at our best as a society when we ensure that all diverse perspectives and backgrounds and communities are seen, are heard, are represented, and that goes for businesses and local communities, state and federal government, and definitely in our media. So it's fundamental to the success of our democracy that. And that of the people, that we are of the people, by the people, for the people, and that certainly includes you, members of the press. Such a critical piece of that important democratic puzzle. We rely on you to shine a light on what's really going on in every facet of our lives, and we rely on you to reach people where they are so they're informed and aware of what's happening in our world. So I want to say thank you. That's so important right now as we see too much misinformation, disinformation, attacks on the press. The courage that you show to seek the truth and tell the truth is absolutely critical. So I want to say thank you. We are committed to the rule of law, and I'll get to your question in 1 second.
Okay.
And we are definitely focused on upholding our democracy and making sure that the law is followed, including, yes, by the President of the United States. And unfortunately, he has been a repeat offender when it comes to violating the law and trampling on the Constitution. And I wish that I and my fellow Democratic Attorneys General never had to go to court because the President of the United States was breaking the law or violating the Constitution. But unfortunately, we've had to. We've done it 26 times in 23 weeks. That's more than once a week. It's double the speed and amount of lawsuits than in Trump 1.0. And it is all based on what he does. If he follows the law, we don't go to court. If he breaks the law, we go to court. And so he's broken the law and hurt our states 26 times in 23 weeks. And it's up to him what he does next, but we don't see any slowing down in those cases, unfortunately. And we are absolutely immovable. I am immovable on the proposition that the president must follow the law, that no one is above the law. He thinks he's above the law. He's not. No one is. And so we will continue to go to court. If rights are violated, we'll go to court to vindicate them. If the law is broken, we'll go to court to make sure that the illegal activity is stopped and blocked. We've had cases that involved a whole range of different issues, including ending a case that sought to end birthright citizenship. And I'll talk about today's ruling. We've pushed back against unlawful restrictions on the right to vote, on unlawful and very damaging tariffs on unelected billionaire Elon Musk trying to access private information of Californians and Americans, the repeated effort to block funding that Congress has already appropriated, whether it be education funding or public health funding or other funding, and of course the deployment of military in an American city, the militarization of Los Angeles, which we believe is unlawful. We went to court on that as well. So we unfortunately don't expect the barrage of unlawful and chaotic and disruptive executive orders and actions to slow down, which means neither will our work ahead. Got a full tank of gas, full of energy, ready for what's next, whatever it might be. My job is to defend the rule of law, defend the people of California, our future, our values, and we will do that each and every time, whatever it takes. In terms of how many times we go to court and how many times we have to block the president from his unlawful activity. Unfortunately, the president has shown time and time again that he has no problem flat out ignoring laws that Congress has enacted and plowing ahead in support of his agenda. Republicans, unfortunately, have made clear that they're fine with letting that happen, but I'm not fine with it, nor are fellow Democratic attorneys general. So if the president breaks the law, we'll stop him. If he violates the Constitution, we'll see him in court. And we will continue that fight. And that's what we're doing on the Trump work. Unfortunately, it's been busy because he has been busy breaking the law. So we've had to respond appropriately, but we continue to do all the work that we've done before Trump was ever elected. We proudly and have the privilege of serving 39 million Californians. We have 6,000 employees almost in our Department of Justice. We're tackling fentanyl and hate crimes and human trafficking and organized retail crime. We're going after big pharma, big oil, big tobacco when they hurt our people in pursuit of trying to turn a profit. We're tackling our housing crisis and hate crimes. We just issued on Wednesday our most recent hate crimes report, which saw in 2024 a 2.7% increase in reported hate crimes, hate crime events. So unfortunately, hate crimes are not going down, they're going up. And we continue to have the immovable and resolute position that there's absolutely no place for hate in California. And I hope that our partners, you in the media, will use the data that we put out to better understand where we are and see how we can address the problem with the urgency it demands when it comes to hate crimes. So let me just say thank you again for all the work that you're doing to report the facts, to tell the truth, to ensure Americans are informed, that they know what their elected representatives are doing and what the challenges are that we're facing, what their elected representatives are not doing as well. And I'll answer your question now and then open it up any other questions that you might have. But today's U.S. Supreme Court order on our birthright citizenship case certainly was a mixed bag. I do want to make clear it did not address the underlying substantive issue of whether the constitutional right of birthright citizenship continues to be a constitutional right. I believe that is very clearly established in the U.S. Constitution. The U.S. Supreme Court has upheld it, and that birthright citizenship will continue to be a right. If you're born on American soil, you're an American citizen, period, full stop. Doesn't matter who your parents are, what their immigration status is. That's been the rule. It's in the 14th Amendment of the U.S. Constitution, and I believe that will continue. The court order today was about what type of remedy is appropriate. What can a court order when states go into court and plaintiffs go into court seeking a order to address an unlawful act? And they decided that there's not authority in the courts for what has been called universal injunctions that apply to not just the parties that are before the court, but to other parties that are not before the court. And the court said you need to be a party before the court to get relief. And here we think that the 23 Democratic Attorney General represented states that have gone to court deserve a nationwide injunction in order to get the complete relief that we deserve. So we are continuing to seek a nationwide injunction on this issue. We've always said that nationwide injunctions are not always appropriate, and they're not never appropriate. They're sometimes appropriate, and we believe that they're appropriate here when it's a constitutional right that applies to everybody. And the difficulty and the administrative chaos and the financial cost to states of having a baby born in Texas have a different immigration status than a baby born in California. But if that baby in Texas comes to California, California will recognize that baby as a U.S. citizen. That creates harms to California that are deserving of a nationwide injunction. So that's where we are. That's my view of the case today. Of course, there are parts that were disappointing, but we think that we will still secure a nationwide injunction, and we believe that birthright citizenship will still be upheld as a constitutional right.
Thank you so much, Mr. Attorney General. There's a reporter, Nevin Kalipali. Do you want to ask your question of the Attorney General? Because this is something I was going to ask regarding who these ICE officers are. People have a lot of suspicions out there that who are these people with the masked face? Who are these people that have no badges, that don't identify themselves? But there's a reporter here asking a specific question about local militia. Nevin, do you want to ask your question?
Yeah. So I'm a reporter in Shasta County, and we have like a local militia called the Cottonwood Militia, and I've gone to some of their recruitment meetings and talked to the leaders. And I just had a question about, like, they claim that forming an organized militia is part of the Second Amendment and legal, and that if they were asked by ICE, which I don't think they would be, they would work with them. And so I'm just like wondering what the official sort of like legality of both those things are.
Well, let me just first address the issue of ICE agents and masks. I know that that's been a concern to many people, many Californians, many Americans, appropriately so. I think it's an inappropriate behavior and conduct. It's unsafe for the ICE agents. It's unsafe for the public. It allows for the possibility of copycat criminal groups to pose as ICE agents and harm Californians and Americans. It puts ICE agents at risk because people don't know who they are. And if they're not clearly marked and don't look official and have their faces covered, folks could act in self-defense, feeling that they are being the victim of crime. Also, the ICE agents don't typically communicate with other local law enforcement or state law enforcement, like my office, which is a typical practice to have the communication, so you can have what we call deconfliction. So law enforcement doesn't respond to a law enforcement operation and put lives at risk and provide threats to public safety. So there's a lot of problems with it. And it would probably require the federal government being firmer about the requirements of their federal agents because of the way the U.S. Constitution works with the Supremacy Clause, intergovernmental immunities, federal preemption at times. What states can do to require federal law enforcement agents to engage in certain practices is limited, unfortunately. But we still have the bully pulpit, and we'll continue to say that it's wrong. It's unsafe, puts lives at risk, and certainly is not the image that we want in a democratic society. Masked people, not knowing who they are, grabbing people off the street, putting them in vans, and seemingly disappearing them is not who we are, what we should stand for. So with respect to the militia and the Second Amendment, I would need to see the specific conditions and the constitutional provision that they're relying on, and its interpretation by the court to have an exam to be appropriately opining on whether what is contemplated is lawful or not. But the idea of folks who are not actually trained peace officers, trained officers in a certain type of conduct sounds like, including immigration enforcement, does not seem like a recipe for success, nor does it seem safe.
I'm going to ask you a final question. I know we're closing in on the hour. I think this is very important. There's reporting that data from Social Security and Medicaid or Medi-Cal in California has been turned over to DHS. Have you looked into what they're doing with that data? And in the case of Doge, for example, what people like Musk did with that data and what they could potentially do?
We're looking at it and don't have anything to announce today, but we are very interested in considering appropriate action on it to make sure that no rights are violated, that the rule of law is being followed. It was disturbing to hear the reports of data that was not supposed to be used for immigration enforcement, only for healthcare, to be shared with Homeland Security and to be potentially used for immigration enforcement. And we believe that if that is what's being done or that is the imminent plan, that it's likely unlawful. And we would be active to ensure that only lawful conduct is engaged in by the federal government. So we're on this issue. We've been looking at it closely. We're deeply involved in it, and we're planning appropriate action.
Attorney General, thank you so much. I just want to tell you that there's dozens of journalists, many of whom work in California, many of whom work in other states here. What can you tell us about what attorney generals like you yourself, and other attorney generals across the country will do to protect the right to report and to be a journalist in this country?
We'll do everything we can to protect and defend you. We right now believe and find ourselves to be the first and last line of defense. Such a critical role that we have to protect our rights, our freedoms, the rule of law, our Constitution, including the right of the free press to report the truth, to have access to their elected officials, and to report on what they're doing, what they're not doing, to have access to information. That is an absolutely critical building block and foundational pillar of our democracy. And so sometimes we can sue when we have standing as states. Usually that's a form of financial harm to the state of California. Sometimes we don't have the standing to sue, but we get involved in lawsuits as friends of the court. They're called amicus, or filing amicus briefs. And we've done that when it's come to attorneys who have been treated wrongly, when Harvard University that's been treated unlawfully, and others. And we've also done it when it comes to NPR and some of your colleagues in the press who've been treated wrongfully. And we will continue to do it because we believe in the critical and essential nature of your role, of your mission. It's critical to democracy. It's more important now than ever. It's important that you continue to do what you always do, to courageously and unfettered and unblocked continue your dogged pursuit of the truth. Absolutely critical. And I can speak for myself, and I can also channel the views I know my fellow Democratic attorneys general share, which is that we will fight for your right to continue to report, truth seek, and truth tell.
Final word, do you still have faith in that you can stop legally a man who doesn't seem to believe in the law and who's getting Supreme Court decisions like today's?
I do, absolutely. Today is certainly, with today's decision, it's as I mentioned, a mixed bag. There's some setbacks in it, but there's also a lot of lights of hope and rays of hope in it. And the Supreme Court has been thoughtful in many of its decisions. They stayed, for example, or blocked the deportation of immigrants under the Alien Enemies Act that were going to be brought to other countries and jails in other countries like El Salvador. So I believe that there is generally an ongoing commitment to the rule of law on the U.S. Supreme Court, not by all justices in the same way, but as a body, as a fully constituted body. And definitely our district court judges, our appellate court judges are wrestling with the law and the facts, are issuing opinions. A proof point is we're winning in almost all of our cases. Of those 26 cases that we've brought, when the court has ordered a temporary restraining order or a preliminary injunction, which takes a peek at the ultimate merits of the case and says, are you likely to win this case? They've answered that question in the affirmative, that yes, we are likely to win, and ordered in our favor and blocked the unlawful action of the federal government. And the federal government, despite what some people might think, is almost always following those court orders. Sometimes we have to move to enforce a court order, and then the court issues a clarifying order, and then they follow it. So the court orders are broadly being complied with, but it is not normal, not acceptable, and it is very dangerous that we have a president who seems to blow past the law and trample over the Constitution so frequently. It's not normal. It's very uncommon, and it is never acceptable. And so we will continue to go to court where they do believe in the rule of law to ensure that he is held accountable and is only allowed to do lawful things and not unlawful things.
California Attorney General Rob Bonta, thank you so much. Thank you on behalf of all the community media, the ethnic media in this call, and thank you to all the panelists who are still here. Have a good weekend, everyone.